There are many tiers under the Northern Lights. This is Libertarian Vision, your source of decentralized and distributed information. The West has a veneration for Scandinavian states. Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, seem to socialists to be perfect examples of places where government works. It's normal to hear, you libertarians don't believe in the state because the state here is flawed. But there are states that work in the world, look at Norway. Our healthcare system is complete rubbish, but there are places where public health works. The state is a disgrace because the people don't know how to vote, but in Scandinavia everything works wonderfully. Leaving important things like health, education and security in the hands of politicians is foolhardy anywhere. And this view that things work well in Nordic countries disappears very quickly when people move to those countries. Having a big, controlling government can, contrary to what most people think, be a complete nightmare. One of the big nightmares that many foreigners who have children, or even Norwegians, is the Barnevernet, the Guardianship Council, or Child Protective Services. Child Protective Services, as you know, is a state assistance network that aims to protect critically ill minors. Parents addicted to drugs, parents who abuse children, parents who abandon and do not take care of children, anyway, very sad situations that everyone considers absurd. Most parents typically want the best for their children. The vast majority of the parents wants a comfortable life for their children. But, it is a fact, there are sometimes absurd cases. In theory, the Child Protective Services there works the same way as it does here. If someone makes a report of child abuse, sometimes at school, sometimes neighbors, the council will initiate an investigation, appoint a psychologist or social worker to visit the family and, if it proves the child has been abused, it can withdraw the child of the house and take to a foster home. This can be a temporary or even definitive measure. That sounds like a good thing, right? After all, in fact, it is important to prevent children from being abused by their parents. The problem is that although it is an important function, as with absolutely any function assigned to the state, it takes away rights from individuals. It is immediately used for political gain by the people involved. Instead of the state actually seeking a solution to the problem, state officials, social workers and psychologists start using the case for their own benefit. There, just as here, instead of looking for real problems in effectively dysfunctional families, which is a lot of work and poses risks to the personal safety of social workers, they focus their work on teasing the lives of immigrants with children, people with many kids or anyone they don't get along with. But there they have a bigger structure and manage to do an enormous degree of absurd atrocities. Having a state that works, believe me, is worse than having a broken state like ours. A well-known example is the case of Cecilia, who was denounced at school. The exact reason is not known. The Guardianship Council offered help, which the mother refused. So they decided to start an investigation. Child Protective Services agents showed up at night, a woman, a psychologist, and a man, a psychiatrist. They entered her house claiming that they were merely observing work. Preventive work. Of course, the mother was nervous about the presence. At one point the girl said she was hungry, the mother said she would make food when the inspectors left and gave her a cereal bar. Days later, the police showed up to take her daughter away and she had to respond to a lawsuit that said she fed her daughter exclusively on cereal bars. They said the house was a mess. Great novelty home with small child being a mess. Worse, immigrant families, as they typically have different customs, no matter how well they take care of their children, end up being targeted at these times. Inez was married and had 8 children in a small Norwegian town, something absurdly rare in Norway. At one point she was accused of spanking children. She and her husband were arrested and the 4 youngest children taken to Barnevernet, due to a complaint from neighbors. There was a fight between the 2 younger children. One of the children bit the other and the mother, to separate the children, slapped the hand of the child who had bitten his brother. Of course, hitting children is wrong. But to say that you can raise children to an age with a minimum of discernment, without using any physical force, is simply unrealistic. The case was led, by chance, by the same psychiatrist who handled Cecilia's case. Parents had to defend themselves against criminal charges. After a report from several other psychologists and specialists, it was clearly demonstrated that there was no violence in the family and that it was an isolated case. The parents were acquitted, 2 of the imprisoned children released, but 2 remained in Barnevernet's possession for a few more years. It was later discovered that the court's decision was made based on comments made by the psychiatrist in question about the report of other psychologists who found no evidence of violence in the family. Why do tutelary council agents seek to make life miserable for families? Many Norwegians have the feeling that they do this solely to keep their jobs. The fact is that Barnevernet is a huge public body in Norway, and the number of real problems is relatively small, especially in smaller cities. So, the various guardianship council offices need to find cases to remain relevant. This is not an entirely out-of-place explanation. As we have already explained, the state is inefficient, among other reasons, because the structure encourages inefficiency. If the government gives a budget for 2 public schools this year, by the end of the year, School A shows excellent results, children passing the grade, everything is working, while School B fails at all, huge dropouts, broken toilets in the school. Which school do you think will have more budget next year? You got it right, School B. School A, at best scenario, will have the same budget this year. If it worked, why would I need more money? School B, on the other hand, can cry for more money. The budget didn't work, I need triple to work. And it will probably take something else. In the end, every public manager has an incentive to fail. If you fail, you earn more money. This logic, applied to child protective services, requires the council to find problems, even if it has to nitpick. But the cases of Cecilia and Inez unfortunately wasn't just that. I wish it had just been the traditional state mess. Remember the psychiatrist who wrote the reports on both cases? Well, he wasn't just responsible for these 2 cases. He was responsible for hundreds of cases of families separated by Barnevernet. His name is Joe Erik Broin. Months later, he would be at the center of a scandal. He was found by police with more than 4 million pornographic images of children up to 14 years old. 500 hours of pornographic videos involving adults having sex with children. Think of the most abject and absurd things. Well, the material was beyond what you can imagine. Not only does the state have the incentive to fail, positions of power tend to attract the worst people to them. Those 2 cases, of Cecilia and Inez, became known because these mothers denounced and gave interviews to newspapers, revealing the injustice practiced by the organ. This kind of problem, however, is common in all Scandinavian countries. All the parents live there in fear of having their family torn apart at any moment, because the local bureaucrat has to justify their budget, or perhaps their sexual perversions. Be careful that politicians and public officials can help with anything, especially important things like education, health and child safety. There are problems that can be solved by the free market, by voluntary society. On the other hand, there are problems that cannot be solved at all. There is no problem that the state can solve. The Norwegian Barnevernet is clear proof of this. And be careful when thinking that Scandinavian countries are examples of countries that work. Thanks for your audience. This article was suggested, written and revised by Peter Turgenev. If you like this video, click on the like icon below and share the video on your social network. If you want to be notified of other videos, click subscribe and then the bell icon. See ya!